Hi everyone, Allie here from the Family Meeple. Today I'm going to start a series that ranks 10 solo board games that I've used for 10 by 5 solo challenges in 2022. In 2022, I set myself 3 solo challenges, which were all a 10 by 5, meaning I was going to play 10 games 5 times within the challenge period. My challenges ran in 4-month segments. The first was from January through April, and then May through August, and the one I'm currently working on is from September to December. So today we're going to start with segment 1, which is the first 10 games in the challenge from January to April. You can see the 10 games right here, and we're going to talk about which ones I liked the best, and we'll rank them from 1 to 10. I do like all of these games solo and would play them all again if I had the opportunity, and I'm sure that I will. So this is more a list to just let you know of these 10, where they all fall and how I liked them. And before we get started, I'm going to clear everything off the table, and then we'll come back and introduce each game one at a time. First up, coming in at number 10, is New York Zoo from Uwe Rosenberg and Capstone Games. New York Zoo is a polyomino tile placement game featuring really cute, adorable zoo animals. In the multiplayer game, players will take turns moving an elephant around a rondel to select tiles or breed animals within their zoo. The first player to complete their entire zoo by placing polyomino tiles to cover all of the open spaces will win. In the solo mode, there is no other player to compete against, and it is essentially a beat your own score. In the solo mode, you will still be moving the elephant around the rondel to select tiles and breed animals. However, you only have 2 turns around the rondel in order to complete your entire zoo. If you complete your entire zoo before you've gone around the rondel twice, then you win, and your score will depend on how far back you are from the original starting space on that second lap. During the solo play, you can't select any tile that you want to go to or any spot on the rondel like you would in a multiplayer game. Instead, you are given tokens valuing 0 through 5. On each turn, you will select one of the tokens to use. You'll then move the elephant that many spaces around the rondel and take the action on the space that you land on. Once you have used all of the tokens, you'll be able to flip them all back over and have them to use again. I do like in New York Zoo the puzzle of trying to figure out how to efficiently use those tokens in order to move around the rondel without spending too much time. But in the solo mode, because it is beat your own score, it can feel very samey from game to game. It doesn't leave a lot of variation in the game as you play solo, but it is a very relaxing game, and I would definitely play it again. This one comes in at number 10 primarily because of the sameness and because of the beat your own score element. But I do enjoy it. It will stay in the collection, and I definitely like this one a lot for multiplayer games, and the solo is fun as well. Coming in at number 9 is Floriferous, designed by Steve Finn and Eduardo Baraf and published by Pencil-First Games. Floriferous is one of the most recent games in the nature-themed relaxing games line from Pencil-First and features beautiful artwork from Clementine Campardu. In Floriferous, players are moving their pawn across a garden, collecting flowers, statues, and other scoring cards like bouquets, and scoring objectives. In the multiplayer game, players will select one card from the column in front of them on each round. Depending on which row they select from within the column will determine the player order for the next round. So as you move through the garden, collecting flowers or scoring objectives, if you select one that's lower down, namely the scoring objectives, you will go later, picking in the next round. In the solo game, it plays a bit differently in that you will simply alternate turns between yourself and what they call the pesky neighbor, which is the crow. The crow will remove one card from the column in front of where you're at before you take your turn. And so you have to determine whether or not you think that the crow is going to take the card that you really want from the row in front of you or not. The crow will do things like take a card out entirely, take a card out and replace it with a random face down card, or add pebbles to a card in order to entice you to take it. Any pebbles on cards that you have not taken by the end of the round will be given to the crow, and if he acquires a certain number of pebbles, then he will actually take one of your collected cards away from you and you will not have it for scoring at the end. You can, once per game, use the cup of tea card to throw at the crow and prevent him from taking a card in front of you and take 2 turns in a row. Floriferous is a lovely game that I very much enjoy playing in multiplayer and have had great success introducing it to other people. The solo game is quite good. It is another beat your own score mode, which is not my favorite, but because it is so quick playing and it's a very relaxing game, it is still enjoyable to play and try to beat your own score. It is in a very small box, which is nice. You can take it with you if you're traveling somewhere. It does not take up a lot of space, and it is, like I said, very quick to play. I would play this one again. I have played it quite a few times after my first initial 5 plays, but because of the light weight of the solo, it just didn't come in any higher on my list. But if you are looking for a very lightweight, relaxing solo game with beautiful artwork, I highly recommend checking out Floriferous. Small Islands, which was designed by Alexis Allard and published by Mushroom Games and Lucky Duck Games. Small Islands is a tile placement game that plays multiplayer up to 4 players. It also includes a solo mode with an AI system using cards called Alexis. In the multiplayer game, players are taking turns placing tiles out to create small islands with features such as lotus flowers, dragon fruits, a green leaf, temples, and anchors or ports of harbor around the islands. As you create these islands, each player will have a specific scoring objective card for the round that they will use to place settlements on the island at the end of the round and score points. In the multiplayer game, each player can place out tiles until they decide that they're ready to stop the round, and then they will place their boat or a neutral colored boat out into the play area to signal that they are ready for a scoring phase. In the solo mode, it works very similarly to the multiplayer. The player will play exactly the same as they do in the multiplayer game, which I like because then once you've learned the rules multiplayer, there's no extra rules to learn to play it solo, except for running the AI. The AI is run by a series of cards which can be set up in multiple configurations to adjust the difficulty level of your games. The AI card will be flipped over on Alexis's turn, and the AI will place a tile out as close as it can to the tile that you most recently placed, following the rules outlined on the card. The card will typically tell you to place the tile to the left, right, up, or down from the tile that you placed. If the tile cannot be placed following those placement rules, Alexis will discard the tile and simply score victory points. Alexis will also push the rounds forward. As soon as the stack of exploration tiles has been exhausted to indicate that the round can be completed for scoring, Alexis will draw cards and likely play a card that tells you to enter a scoring round. So you do have to be very careful about where you're placing your tiles and making sure that you're meeting the objectives of your scoring card quickly so that you don't get caught off guard. Other than that, the game plays exactly the same. Alexis will score based on the number of settlements that she has put out onto the different islands, as well as a general base score, and you will score points normally. I really enjoyed my plays of Small Islands. I got into the hobby primarily playing games like Carcassonne and Lanterns and other tile placement games, and wasn't really aware that a tile placement game like this could have a solo mode where an AI was actually putting tiles out and adding to the board on the table. I really like how they did the AI on this one, and you have to think about where you're placing your tiles because you know that the Alexis AI will try to place their tile as close to yours as possible. So if you're trying to build out an island and you don't want it to be closed off yet, you have to think about the way that you place your tile and the way that you orient it. This game is a lot of fun. It plays very quickly, and if you like tile placement games with unique scoring objectives each round and being able to puzzle out the best way to place your tiles out without a whole lot of interference, I definitely recommend this one. It is fun that the AI actually scores, and so you do have very clear win and loss conditions. All right, number 7 is Underwater Cities, designed by Vladimir Suchi and published by Rio Grande Games. In Underwater Cities, you are managing a hand of cards and trying to place your submarines or workers out onto the board to take specific actions. The solo game works just like the multiplayer game. There are no changes to the rules for the solo game. You are still drawing cards into your hand and trying to match up the color of the cards in your hand to the color of the actions that you are taking on the board so that you can take both the action of the card and the action of the space. You are still managing resources and you are still building up your underwater city on your personal board in front of you. The only changes from the multiplayer version to the solo version is that on each round, one of the worker placement spaces in each of the 3 sections will be blocked off. Those spaces cannot be used during that round, and so you will have to plan very carefully on where you take your actions and how you plan out your turns. The rounds play out the same as far as the number of rounds and when you earn production, and there are clear win-loss conditions in the rulebook. The win-loss conditions are essentially a score and a criteria for the number of cities that you must have connected in your underwater city network, but I do enjoy the challenge of this game. After playing it 5 times during the challenge, I have not won the solo mode on this game. It does require that you meet at least 100 points with, I believe, 7 connected cities. But I did come close, and I do like the challenge of maximizing out each of my turns to see if I can do better than I did the last time. It's always interesting to see what the different strategies are in each game, if you're going to go heavy on kelp farming, or if you're going to go down a different path trying to be able to develop different resources on your board. So that's number 7, Underwater Cities. Number 6 is Blackout Hong Kong, designed by Alexander Pfister and published by Eggert Spiel. Blackout Hong Kong was the first Alexander Pfister game that I actually played. I played Blackout Hong Kong in December before starting the 5x5 solo challenge as a solo and really enjoyed it. When I put it on the challenge, I knew that the solo campaign included in the box ran through 5 different scenarios. But the game is quite challenging, and over 5 plays, I did not complete all 5 of the solo challenges. I think I got through 1, maybe the second one, and was on the 3rd one. In Blackout Hong Kong, the solo works the same way as the multiplayer game. And again, I do enjoy solo modes where the player plays the same game as they would in a multiplayer game, because it's a great opportunity to play the game as it was designed for the player and practice in case you want to play it with other people or potentially teach it to someone in the future or just learn it. They're also just fun to play solo. But in Blackout Hong Kong, you are attempting to manage resources and complete objectives on cards over a series of turns. In the solo mode, there is no true AI involved in it. You're not going to have an AI score to beat. It is essentially a completing objectives for the scenario mode. So either you complete the objectives for the scenario or you don't. Typically, most of the scenarios have to do with the number of emergency plan objectives that you've completed and the total number of money that you have left over at the end of the game, which is one of the ways you get victory points, and then your victory points that you earned in game. And in Blackout Hong Kong, I really enjoy the challenge of trying to complete those objectives because you do sort of have a ticking clock. There is a deck of cards that you will run through each round, and as you purchase cards, the market will be refilled and the deck will start running down. The solo mode also will remove cards from that display on each turn. When you don't buy one, it will always remove a card. And so whether you're buying cards or not, you're always running down that clock. And I found in my plays that the clock ran down faster than I was expecting in every single play. And usually I was, 1 or 2 turns away from hitting the objectives if I didn't hit them. I really enjoy the card play in this game. Like I said, there's different ways to meet the objectives, and some of your objectives have to do with how you play your cards down into your planning in the first phase. So you will decide which cards you're going to play in the planning phase, and as they line up, you will meet certain objectives. So it will, for example, say it needs to have 2 purples, a yellow, and a blue card in one of your planning sections in order to meet one of the objectives of the cards. And once you've done that, you'll be able to mark that off. But all of those cards that you play down during the planning phase are cards that you don't have in hand during later phases to go out and search through Hong Kong and look for different resources like gasoline and food and meet those objectives out on the board. And that's one of the main ways that you can earn points, is by exploring through Hong Kong and securing districts. And securing districts in the solo game can be quite difficult because there are no other players to come and explore and secure different spaces within Hong Kong and help you close off those districts. So all of the districts that you close off, you have to do by yourself. So it really drives you to pay attention to where you're going to explore in Hong Kong, how you're going to move out with your markers, and trying to meet the objectives of getting from point A to point B. So I really liked Blackout Hong Kong. It's one that I would love to play again. At some point I would like to finish working through the campaign and then potentially teach this to some more people as well. But that is number 6, Blackout Hong Kong. Number 5 is Genotype, published by Genius Games and designed by John Covey, Paul Salomon, and Ian Zhang. I apologize if I mispronounced any of those names. I did my best. Genotype is a Euro worker placement and dice drafting game that is designed for 1 to 5 players. In Genotype, you are working through phases to place out your workers to take different actions around the board, and then draft gene dice from the gene pool to validate traits of the pea plants that you are researching. After that, you will have a chance to purchase upgrades and hire assistants before going into the next round. In the multiplayer game, players are taking places, placing out their worker pieces during the worker placement phase, and then they are competing through first, second, and regular shift dice drafting to draft the gene type dice. And then they are also competing in the market to purchase the upgrades, making upgrades more expensive for the players that come after them. In the solo version, you are actually playing against a card-driven AI opponent who will place workers out during the worker placement game, who will draft gene dice during the gene dice drafting phase, and will also purchase improvements and hire assistants during the improvements phase. So the AI is actually competing with you in each of the phases to simulate another opponent. I really enjoyed Genotype as a solo. I loved the way that the solo opponent was very competitive and acted in many ways like a real opponent in the game. I have actually played this game multiplayer as well as solo, And after playing it multiplayer, I think the solo did an even better job of simulating that multiplayer game. It feels very similar playing in both modes. The one thing I will say about the solo cards in Genotype for solo is that they are not the most intuitive at first, and it did take me a few games to really understand how they worked. The design of the solo cards is actually quite clever because the same set of solo cards will work for each of the 3 distinct different phases. And so each of the cards will have information on them about the gene types or about the action, or it will have arrows to show you where you should validate traits on the pea plants, or the arrows can be used to tell you which of the improvements the AI will take during the last round of the last phase of each round. And although these work very well, the use of the cards varies slightly in each of the different phases, and so you do have to learn, in this phase the AI cards work like this, and in this phase the AI cards work like this, and in this phase the AI cards work like this, slightly differently. They do include cards to help you as player aids with the solo to run the AI, and they are very helpful. But again, after 5 plays of this game, I still find that I do need to reference those AI cards as I go through each round and flip them over and make sure that I'm taking all of the actions. Another nice thing about the solo in Genotype is that they offer you varying difficulty levels. And so if you want to make the game slightly easier or slightly harder, there's options in there for that. To make it slightly easier, the AI will not earn quite as much money throughout the rounds, and they won't get extra items and cards when you're playing. And then as you bump up the difficulty, they are going to earn money more easily, and they are going to complete their pea plants and collect things more easily. I typically would play on just the medium level of difficulty, and it is quite challenging. You definitely can win, but you will not always win, which I really enjoyed. Genotype is a beautiful production. The components are top quality. It's nice to just get it out and play with the pieces and explore the game. It has a bit of set collection as well in the pea plants that you are choosing to collect and research and validate traits on, which is always something that I enjoy. So if you are looking for a mid-weight Euro game that can be played solo with a unique theme, I would recommend that you check out Genotype. Coming in at number 4 is Great Western Trail, which was also designed by Alexander Pfister and published by Eggert Spiel. So this is the second Alexander Pfister game that I tried, and it is the second one that I included on my first solo challenge. In Great Western Trail, you are moving your cowboys around a rondel to take them up to Kansas City and deliver your cattle. The cattle that you are collecting are in a hand of cards, so you are doing a bit of deck building by improving the types and variety of cattle that are in your deck, which will provide you with more money when you sell them at market when you get to Kansas City. You're also able to build different buildings out on the trail throughout the game, which will give you areas where you can take more improved actions and different actions that are what are on the board. It also provides opportunities where you can trip up your opponents and require them to pay fees to go past your buildings and continue on the trail. There's a lot of different elements going on in Great Western Trail that I really enjoy, but the rondel and the deck building is probably my favorite 2 elements in the game. The solo mode is included in the second edition, which is the one that I got, but not in the first edition. The first edition didn't come with a solo mode, but there was a fan-made version published on the Board Game Geek website, which was then picked up by Eggert Spiel and Plan B when they published the second edition and modified slightly into what's included in the box. So the solo mode for Great Western Trail is a card-driven AI system where you are competing against an AI opponent called Sam, and he will be moving across the trail just like another player would. He will be collecting cattle just like another player would. He will be turning in cattle at Kansas City. He doesn't actually turn the cards in, he just gets to deliver to the different cities. He starts at a particular place in the track depending on the difficulty level that you select, and then he just continues to move down the trail from there, collecting points. He has simplified versions of all of the actions that the player is going to take. So as I said, he will be placing out buildings and collecting cattle, and he will be hiring cowboys and engineers and I think conductors is what they're called. I can't remember. But he will be collecting employees to put onto his card and creating specializations. As you go through the game, his specializations may change, and if they do, it will impact the actions that he takes on the cards that are drawn. He is very challenging as an opponent, and I enjoyed that when I started playing the solo game, we had actually played this, my mother and I, as multiplayer first, and then picking up the solo and playing against Sam. The AI really pushes the speed of the game in a way that two new players didn't do, or we didn't do, but probably wouldn't do, where we were kind of just stopping at every step on the trail up to Kansas City, trying to maximize how many turns we would get and how many things that we could get accomplished during the game. When you're playing against the Sam AI, he will move very quickly through the trail, and you'll learn that you need to at least keep up with him and make sure that you're delivering to Kansas City at least as often as he is. Because if you're not, then he is going to push the time clock for the end of the game by collecting all of those cowboys and engineers and the employees at the bottom, and then you're just going to get pushed out. So Great Western Trail is a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it solo, and if you enjoy it multiplayer, I would highly recommend that if you like playing solo games that you check out the solo mode, either in the second edition or the one that's available on BGG for the first edition. So number 4 is Great Western Trail. Number 3 is Red Rising, published by Stonemaier Games and designed by Jamie Stegmaier and Alexander Schmidt. This game is based on the novels of the same name, Red Rising, by Pierce Brown. Red Rising is a card collecting hand management game that is based on the novels by Pierce Brown and set in a dystopian future where all of the citizens are set or arranged in different classes by color, with golds at the top and reds at the bottom. The basic premise of the novels in the game is that the reds at the bottom are trying to rise up into the ranks of the golds. The colors and the theme of the books are definitely very tenuous in the game, but I've only read the first book and only have a very cursory understanding of the lore and the world that they're building in here. And primarily for me, I just really liked the card play and the hand management aspects in Red Rising. So in Red Rising, which plays from 1 to 6 players, you are crafting a hand of cards with characters from the novels that work well together. And if you are familiar with the novels, you likely will see the connections and the reason that the designers have put specific characters together or designed it so that certain characters don't want to be together in your hand. It's not necessary to have read the books or enjoyed the books in order to play the game. I certainly have enjoyed it even without being super familiar with the characters, and characters in the books 2 and 3 I'm not familiar with at all, and they will show up. But a lot of the characters will want to be either with a specific person or not with a specific person, and then each of the colors that's in the game has slight variations on how they work. Some of the cards will allow you to increase the size of your hand by drawing more cards that you're able to keep. Some of them will let you move up on the different tracks and earn points that way. There's all kinds of different powers, and you'll definitely need to read all of the text on the cards in order to understand what they do. They're all different. For solo play, the game comes with an Automa Factory designed solo mode, which features a card-driven AI system. And the card-driven AI system in Red Rising actually will play sort of like two different players, in that it will go twice for every one of your turns. So you will play exactly the same as the base game, normal multiplayer rules apply, and then the AI will take a turn. They will flip over a card, and they will add a card to the board in one of the 4 sections, and then they will take a card from the board in one of the 4 sections. All of that is determined by the AI card that's drawn. It will tell you which area to place the new card and which area to take the second card from. It will also tell you if you need to take additional bonus actions, like increasing their position on the fleet track, earning them any helium crystals, or adding any of their influence cubes into the Institute. At the same time, you are competing for all of these different areas as well. You are moving up the fleet track, you are adding cubes into the Institute, and you are collecting helium crystals. The end game is triggered the same way in the multiplayer as in the solo game, and when either you or the AI have 7 in any 2 of those areas, or between the 3 of you, and in solo, one of you is going to have 2 in order for there to be 3. So essentially, when someone hits 2 on any of those, that will trigger the end of the game. In the solo mode, I really enjoy that, again, similar to Great Western Trail, that AI character is constantly pushing you to keep moving forward, to keep driving, to get the best hand and make sure you have everything in place before that clock runs out. The AI will push forward faster sometimes than in a multiplayer game, and be collecting those helium crystals or moving up on that fleet track, and they will trigger the end of the game sometimes before you're ready. I really enjoy the hunt within the deck of trying to not only find the cards that will allow you to increase your hand size, but try to outthink the AI in being able to potentially use those cards more than once. There aren't a ton of cards in the deck that I've found that will allow you to increase your hand size, but increasing your hand size in the game is critical, as every card that you can increase your hand size by is going to increase your potential for earning those points. And so if you can find a card that will let you increase your hand size and play it out in a location that the AI doesn't take it and you can get it back, it always feels really great when you can use those cards more than once. The AI does have specific guidelines on what it's going to take from, and the locations that it will favor from game to game will change and vary as you lay out the designations of A through D on the locations at the beginning of every game. So that is my number 3, which is Red Rising. And if you like playing card games where you're managing a hand of cards and you like being able to take your time and really dig into the text on the cards and not feel like you are pressuring everyone else or slowing everything down, I think Red Rising plays absolutely amazing solo. I enjoyed it multiplayer as well, but solo for me is really where I like playing this one the most. So number 3, Red Rising. Coming in at second place is The Magnificent, published by Aporta Games and designed by Elif Svensson and Christian Ostby. Again, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your names, but this is The Magnificent. So The Magnificent is a dice drafting and sort of a bit dice worker placement. It's more dice action selection game that features kind of miniature puzzles of polyomino placement with the tent tiles and a little bit of traveling with kind of a roll and move mechanic to collect different gems and resources and tents to put on your show, and a lot of planning. So in the Magnificent, you are going to be drafting dice from a general pool and using those dice to activate abilities on 4 cards that you have in front of you each round. At the end of the round, depending on the dice that you've drafted, you will have to pay for every pip on the color that you have the most of. So if I draft 2 purple dice that total up 10 on pip value, then I will have to pay 10 coins at the end of the round to pay for the power of my actions. So the entire game is a balancing act of when do you take those high dice and pay for them because it's going to pay off, and when do you draft lower value dice and try to use them as best you can without bumping up the amount that you're going to have to pay at the end of the round. The dice that you draft will dictate, for example, the path that you can move on. So if you draft a purple dice, you're going to be moving the purple wagon. If you draft a green dice, you'll move the green wagon. If you draft a purple dice, then you can build purple tents into your fairgrounds. If you draft an orange dice, you'll be building orange tents into your fairground. And each of the tents are different shapes and different sizes. Depending on the power, you may be able to build multiple tents. And the tents will be used to put on performances with the master cards that you will draft as well during the game. And all of the different cards that you're collecting will have to have a tent in order to perform. And then they have specific requirements about the tents that are built into your fairgrounds in order to put on that performance. And so there's a lot of planning that's involved based on what you have in front of you to work with, what you have out in front of you that you'll be able to draft from, and the different decisions that you have to make. The game plays over 3 rounds, and you will get 4 turns in every round. It plays exactly the same solo as it does in multiplayer, which I really enjoy because, again, you don't have to learn the rules once for multiplayer and then a separate set of rules for the solo. The Magnificent is actually a beat your own score mode. To an extent, they put in that a score of 200 at the end is considered to be a win condition. In playing the Magnificent during this challenge and before the challenge as well, I personally am not convinced that 200 points with just the base game is realistic. It would essentially require some pretty perfect conditions to be met in order to get up to that 200 points in solo, where you're just drafting what's in the pool and playing by yourself with no player interaction. In the solo, I think I've gotten up around 150, 160 on the base game. But during the challenge, I was able to get a copy of the expansion called the Magnificent Snow, which adds some new cards into the mix, new tile shapes, and it also adds a second board with some bonus actions in that gives you a 5th action on every round. So instead of getting 12 actions total for the game, you are now getting 15 actions for the game, and 200 points with the expansion is doable, and I was able to do it once. So for me personally, I treat the Magnificent as a beat your own score and just try to see how high I can get. For me, if I can get 180 on the base game or 200 with the expansion, I consider that very well done and a victory in my book. The Magnificent is one that I really enjoy the aesthetic of, as well as just the puzzly nature. You can sit there and just analyze every decision that you want to when you're playing solo. You're not going to, bog anybody down with your decision-making time. And I just really enjoy that aspect of it. Magnificent is definitely one that I will pull out regularly to play solo. And if you like dice drafting and puzzly games, I would recommend that you check out the Magnificent. Okay, we're here at number 1, and if you have watched any of my content or seen anything on Instagram or interacted with me, you will probably know that my favorite game is Glen 2 Chronicles, and so it should be no surprise that coming in at number 1 is Glen 2 Chronicles with the Highland Games expansion for my first solo challenge. Glen 2 Chronicles, the base game plays 2 to 4 players and does not include a solo mode. The solo mode for Glen Chronicles was released as part of the Highland Games expansion, and it includes both the solo mode designed by the Automa Factory as well as 3 additional Chronicle or mini expansion modules. In Glen 2, you are doing tile placement as the main mechanism. You will be drafting tiles by moving around a rondel, and you can select any tile you want. You can move forward as far as you want and select a single tile on your turn. You will then take that tile and add it into your clan territory, which you'll start building out with a single double, like a domino tile. The game includes restrictions on how you can place the tiles. You do have to have one of your clan's people in a space that is surrounding the 8 tiles that would be around where you're going to place it. So you have to be very mindful about where you keep your clan's people within your territory that you're building out. And then the tiles will do different things. Some of them will just give you resources. Some of them will allow you to move on the clan board and either gain different benefits or earn victory points or gain abilities that you can use throughout the game. Other ones will allow you to trade resources in for victory points or overbuild on tiles, collect whiskey barrels. There's all kinds of different abilities that you can do with these tiles. And throughout the game, you're going to be building out your territory, moving through the clan board in the effort to earn as many victory points as you can. The solo mode that was designed by the Automa Factory is another one where you will play your game exactly as the multiplayer game was designed. There are no changes to how you play. The AI is built off of a card system, as is pretty common from the Automa Factory, and the cards will dictate which tile from the rondel the AI will be drafting that round. And the AI will draft tiles in a similar manner to you. They will go in turn order based on the game. So if they are behind you and you jump really far forward, they will typically move between 2 and 3 spaces. There's rare occasions where they will move up to about 5 spaces. But if you jump really far forward, it's likely that the AI is going to go twice before you get another turn. So that's something fun to keep in mind, that it has that same feel of the multiplayer game where you do have to be mindful about how far you move forward. The AI will also compete with you in the same way that a multiplayer game would in the base game. So when we get to the end of the first of the 4 stacks of tiles, they will compete with you on how many whiskey barrels you have, how many famous people tiles you've collected, how many landmark tiles you've collected, and then they will also score based on their clansmen, their landscape tiles, their whiskey barrels, and their people that they've collected. So each round they actually will score victory points just from having those items in their board. And then they will also score at the end of each round for their trade tiles. So they will be collecting stone throughout the game, and they will trade those in based on kind of their own rules for the trade tiles. And at the end of the game, the AI will also compete with you for the size of their clan territory. So all of the tiles that they're collecting throughout the game, you are stacking up or laying out in the trade section, and you will count those up. And if their clan is larger than yours is, they will actually lose victory points. If yours is larger than the AI's, then you will lose victory points. The solo mode also includes 5 different levels of difficulty, which I really appreciated. It was nice to be able to kind of step into the difficulty of the solo mode by starting with the lowest version and then kind of moving up through the different levels. With my plays of solo, I basically just always use the regular middle range complexity or difficulty mode. And it seems like a very good balance of you will win sometimes, not always. There has been some discussions, I think, on the BGG forums about the solo mode and the difficulty levels, and that people do find it quite difficult to beat the AI in Glenmore 2 as solo. But I've found that there are some strategies that are pretty strong that you can sort of lean into on your plays and be fairly successful in keeping up with the AI. The other nice thing about the AI mode for Glenmore 2 Chronicles is that it was designed to work with all but one of the Chronicles or the modules. So the content that's included in the base box for the modules, as well as the content that's included in the expansion for the modules, you can actually mix those in, and you can play with, 1, 2, 3. I guess you could throw them all in. I don't think I would do that, but you can play with all of the modules that are included in both the base game and the expansion, with the exception of one, which does require a 3-player game, so it's not included. With the solo mode, you are playing similar to a 2-player game, so you will also have the dice in play that you would use in a 2-player game. So along with the Auto Magnificent AI character coming through and taking the tiles that you were holding out for and really wanting to add into your territory, the dice will also be rolling and taking things out as well. So it's very dynamic. It makes you think on your feet. You can't get too married to one strategy, because the tiles that you were hoping to get for that strategy may be taken, and you'll have to pivot and move in a different direction. So Glenmore 2 Chronicles is my number 1 game, and definitely ranked number 1 on this solo challenge for the first 4 months of the year. In addition to playing just the 4 or 5 games for the solo challenge, I am up to about 30 plays or more of Glenmore 2 Chronicles solo, and it is one that I continue to come back to. It was one that I had played quite a bit before the solo challenge and continue to play constantly after the solo challenge. I typically get it out about once a month or so. I try to get it out at least once a month to play it. For me, Glenmore 2 Chronicles is that sort of comfort food game of I can just pull it out, I know how to play, I know the rules, I know how to run the AI. It's very smooth, and it's always enjoyable every time that I get it out. So that is my number 1, which is Glenmore 2 Chronicles with the solo mode from the Highland Games expansion. So that was my first 10 by 5 solo challenge for 2020, featuring these 10 games which I played solo. And I would love to hear from you in the comments if you've played any of these games solo, if any of these games made it into your favorite solo games list, or based on this selection, is there anything else that you think I should try solo? Well, that's all I have for you today, but coming up next, I will be featuring the second list of 10 solo games that I did play between May and August, so keep an eye out for those. And until then, have lots of fun playing games with your family or playing games solo. Bye.